We are continuing our journey on knowing how Alberta can become independent from Canada. Today, I'll continue to explain how and why Canada became Canada. I'll tell you what you did not learn in school, college, or university. Did you know that Canada was once a war zone and Canada's French and First Nations were taken over as part of a global conquest by Britain? I've described previously how the French put down roots along the east coast of what is now Canada. By and large, these French settlers made a living with fur trading and formed decent relationships with the First Nations tribes. Then came the British, who set out to conquer and take control of the land where the First Nations tribes lived and that had been settled by the French. This happened around the mid-1700s. You've likely heard about the 7 Years' War involving the British versus the French around what's now the east coast of the province of Quebec. Here's what I've learned in my research, that real wars like this were being fought all over the world during this time. In Europe, France and Austria was fighting Great Britain and Prussia. Britain and/or France were also involved in wars in India, the Caribbean Sea region, the east coast of Africa. The British wanted to conquer. Now pay attention to the word conquer. Britain's global conquest was for land and trade. This global British conquest came to the east coast of what is now Canada in a war that lasted about 7 years between 1756 to 1763. The rest of the world was in this war for about 23 years. Think about living in the middle of a war zone for 7 years. That was life on Canada's east coast. Before the British conquest, there were about 60 to 70,000 French settlers. That's about the size of Medicine Hat or Grand Prairie, Alberta in 2025. Imagine being one of the people in that size of a community being violently attacked. People had come from France to leave Europe and put down roots only to be violently attacked after they had settled in a new way of living. Britain won the war here in Canada and won wars against the French around the world, including in India and the Caribbean sugar colonies. In Quebec, the British beat the French on the Plains of Abraham in Quebec, and in 1761, the last French resistance in Montreal capitulated. After conquering the French and their First Nation allies with sword and rifles, there is some credit to the British in that when the French and the First Nations totally surrendered, the British stopped killing. They made an offer to the French settlers. The French were given the choice of packing up their belongings and going back to France, or to stay in their defeated colony with their land, freedom of religion, and the right to continue with fur trading. The First Nations who had fought against the British essentially became quite irrelevant. Now, boats and weapons and food for soldiers all over the world cost a lot of money. After winning land and trade through violent global wars, Britain was broke. Britain's solution was to tax the people in the conquered colonies to the hilt. The 13 colonies on the east coast of the US did not put up with that, so Britain had another war with the colonies south of the 49th parallel. Britain had put so much effort into defeating the French in the US eastern region, only to then lose the territory to the settlers themselves. Along the eastern Quebec region, Britain appointed a governor to rule over that conquered territory. You'll recall in the Frederick Haultain story that this was the British way, to appoint a single governor to rule over the territorial areas. In Quebec, English civil and criminal law replaced the French law. Catholics could not hold public office. Now let's forward more than 200 years later. The 7 Years' War became a distant memory, but a mindset remained in the people of what became the province of Quebec. It was the mindset of having been conquered, of not identifying with the conquerors, even though those original conquerors no longer walked on this earth, and the others were no longer only British. The French maintained a distinct identity. You'll recall that territories became provinces, as we've previously discussed, and Canada's Constitution was ratified in 1867. French identity remained strong for over 200 years. And then came René Lévesque, Premier of the province of Quebec. René Lévesque was born in 1922 in Campbellton, New Brunswick, the son of a lawyer. René became a journalist, a radio and TV host in Quebec, and entered Quebec politics in 1960 as a liberal. But he became increasingly antagonistic against Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. He founded the Parti Québécois political party in 1968 with a laser focus of changing Quebec's status to become a sovereign Quebec within a Canadian economic union. He worked at this vision for 15 years. In 1976, René Lévesque led the PQ to power. Essentially, Pierre Trudeau spawned and fanned the flames of a Quebec sovereignty movement at the same time as Alberta was going through a similar change with an Alberta full independence focus. On May 20th, 1980, under Premier Lévesque, Quebec held its first referendum. The PQ sought a mandate from the people of Quebec to negotiate a new Constitution of Canada to grant Quebec greater autonomy. The concept was that there would be an equality of nations. Quebec would have exclusive power over taxation, laws, and international matters, but still be economically linked to the rest of Canada. The proposed process was that number one, Quebec would hold the referendum. Number two, if the referendum was successful, then terms would be negotiated with Canada. And number three, after terms were fully negotiated, the people of Quebec would hold another referendum to approve the terms. On May 20th, 1980, Quebec's first Sovereignty Association referendum was defeated by 60% of the voters. But think about this. In 1980, Quebec had a population of about 6.5 million people. In that referendum, 1,485,851 people, basically 1.5 million people, voted yes to change Quebec's status within Canada. That was about 40% of the voters. The yes side lost, and the no side won by about 60%. Think about this. After 215 or so years, the mindset of the 60 to 70,000 conquered French settlers who had lived through the 7 Years' War survived. And that mindset was alive and well in the hearts and minds of nearly 1.5 million Quebecois in 1980. René Lévesque died in 1987, but his vision lived on. We're going to continue the discussion of why Canada became Canada and how Alberta can leave Canada on our next video. I'll talk about Quebec's second referendum. If you like what you're learning, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening.
From the mountains to the prairie sky.